These days, everyone and their dog seems to have an air-cooled 911 Restomodded business. The iconic Porsche sports car seems to become the go-to classic for elegant looks, fun, usable performance, and a broad window of personalisation and modification.
But what if I told you there was an alternative? Something a little different to take to Sunday Scramble. Something even more diminutive, dripping in just as much heritage, and possibly even more fun to drive. This is a BMW 1600-2, colloquially known as an O2. But it's not just any O2, if such a thing even exists. This is an O2 owned by James Cherrington, proprietor of JFI Classic Cars and lifelong O2 enthusiast. It's been heavily fettled to his vision of what a fun, usable classic should be.
You see, from the outside, this 1600-2 retains all of its period visual features, even down to the OEM 5-inch wheels. That means you get all the joy of owning an elegant 1960 design, providing a pleasing antithesis to the aggression and heft with which modern-day cars are styled. Open up that front hinged bonnet, however, and it all gets a bit heated. You see, in place of the original 1.6 M10 single overhead cam engine is this, an M42 twin-cam 16-valve engine from the 318 IS E36. Strapped into it is an Eaton M45 supercharger, running moderate boost pressure. All of that fuel and air is organised by a sophisticated Omex ECU, and the car's been set up to be usable, fun and reliable.
So James is here to tell us a little bit more about this gorgeous O2. So James, how come you went for a supercharged M42?
Well, that's a long question to answer. Basically, the car initially started life as a completely standard 1600 with the original M10. And I drove the car like that for quite a while. But in my mind, I always wanted to put a twin cam in it. And it was an idea that stewed for a while. Eventually I found a cheap enough M42 and I thought I'd give it a go. It was probably 8 years ago, maybe 7 years ago when I started. But in my mind at the time, the whole ethos was to build a car that looked completely standard, like an original early O2, which Fly is, but to have enough power to make it a good, usable, quick road car. So the twin cam M42 from a E30, E36 seemed like a good place to start. So it was very much a test bed. And over the years that I've owned the car and used it as a daily driver, it has evolved. The original M42 gave up. Then it had an M44 in it for a short period. Then it went back to an M42 with the supercharger. And over that time, obviously everything else on the car evolved, the brakes, the suspension, and it was daily driven for pretty much the whole 7 years that it's been in evolution, should we call it. But yeah, that was the reason for an M42, was just really to go faster. Yeah.
So what's that actually like to drive?
It's quite interesting. It's the torque that makes it drivable. It's very, very exciting, I would say. Yeah. You've still got 185 tyres. The gearing's reasonably low, so it does have a fair bit of pep, to be fair. I mean, it's not super fast. If you're going to have a straight line drag race with an M2 or something like that, you're going to look an idiot. But squirting around the local lanes, it is a quick car. Yeah, there's no gap. It's 200 horsepower and it weighs just under a ton. So yeah, it's quick, and it's very engaging. You feel feedback from the brakes, the steering. It's not quiet in there, but it's quiet enough to use. It's much more of an experience. That's how I describe it. It's an experience rather than just a vehicle. Yeah.
So a palate cleanser from modern cars then?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you've only ever driven modern cars and you got into this, you would enjoy it, but it would take a while, I think, for you to switch your brain into gear from, I'm in a 55-year-old car. There's a lot going on. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the use case for the modifications you've done?
Yeah, so the modifications were to use the car as a daily driver. But my daily driving probably isn't the same as everybody else's daily driving. My daily driving is to drive on B roads. We're in the country. That was the main use for the car. Like I said, it was just a daily driver. It was just my car, and I always wanted to go faster. I wanted it to handle better. I needed the modifications then came as a result of what I wanted from the car. But as it stands now, it's a world away from how it was when I first got it. But I've enjoyed the journey modifying it, which is good.
And can you tell us a little bit more about what you do at JFI Classics?
Of course, yeah. So we almost exclusively work on O2s. There's a couple of other BMWs of the same age that we will work on, but exclusively O2s. So be that full restoration, servicing, welding repairs, everything, but O2s only. But a lot of what we do recently are M44 conversions, which is the next generation of the four-cylinder twin cam, which came in the E36. That's a very popular modification. So it's 150, 160 horsepower. A reasonably straightforward modification that we perfected over the years using this car as kind of the test bed. And yeah, it works well. It's a relatively cheap way of getting decent horsepower into an O2, not adding any extra weight and not modifying the shell or the body in any way. So it's pretty popular, and that's a lot of what we do. Yeah.
So the M42 swap is completely non-intrusive in terms of cutting up the shell or anything like that?
Yeah, so the M42, M44 conversion, there's no modifications to the actual shell at all, other than a small hole in the bulkhead to put an ECU harness through. The transmission tunnel, the engine bay, there's no modification at all. So it is 100% reversible. The only thing we do recommend is putting the battery in the boot. So you may want to remove the tray, but you don't have to. We've done conversions both ways, but it's just nice to put a bit more weight in the back with the battery in the boot. But like I say, there's no need to do it. So you can do it without modifying any part of the car.
So this is a super early O2. Can you tell us a bit more about what makes an early car an early car?
Yeah, so there's the O2s. They had lots of redesigns through the life. The very early cars, so 67, 68, all come with the short bumpers, no lower trims, which makes short overriders. They're much more simple looking, in my opinion, a far more attractive car. Obviously the early cars had the round rear lights. Then the 71 modification was to put plastic on the bumpers and the lower door trims, lower body trim, which kind of just made it look a little bit more modern, but still with the round lights. And then the last incarnation was with the square rear light to the rear panel. And over that time the interiors changed as well. The early ones are a much nicer design, I think, with the big chrome strip across the dash. As the years went on, I think BMW probably wanted to modernise it and probably make it cheaper to manufacture. And a lot of those features disappeared. Like the early grills are chrome, well, they're anodised aluminium, but very shiny. As the model moved on, they went to plastic grills, and it just became, you could almost see that they were cutting costs. So yeah, the early cars are, in my opinion, more desirable, and I think the market probably shows that early cars sell more quickly, and people do, I don't know, respect the fact that it's an early car. It's a bit nerdy, I suppose, but there's generally people prefer the early ones. But yeah.
So how come you're selling it?
So the car has been mine, like I said, for I think 9 years. In that time, it's been through every incarnation from a standard O2 right to where it is now. I've used it as it is now mechanically. It's done 20-something thousand miles, and I've been all over Europe in it. I've driven it on lots of O2 outings, and I've really enjoyed the car. Last year, I decided that I would refresh the bodywork, which ended up getting a little bit carried away. So it had new wings, new doors, new bonnet, new boot, new front panel, all new trim, interior retrimmed, did everything to it, and obviously it looks beautiful as you see it now. But the problem is that I can't drive it anymore. I like to scrape the hedges. I like to drive the car quickly, and I can't use it anymore. I'll damage it, and it will never look like this again. So I've come to the decision that it's probably best for someone else to enjoy it, and I can move on to something else.
Cool. Right, let's see what it's like to drive out on the road. Right, Hello. So I would have got James to drive this, but he'd probably just tell you that's all brilliant. So let's get me in it. I've never driven a car this old. I've never driven a car with non-power brakes. I've driven cars like power steering, but basically, you know, this is a big learning curve for me. But headline points are, this is fun at any speed and just so special. So first off, it's tiny. We're on a little Welsh B road here, absolutely gorgeous bit of road. I've got so much space within my lane, I can literally take a line and do an apex and come out and stay completely within my lane. That is absolutely brilliant. Now, we've got non-power assisted brakes, so much feel through the pedal. It makes you think why anyone bothered doing power assisted brakes, to be honest. It's just absolutely gorgeous to use. And we've got a big wheel, no power steering, 5-inch rims at the front. Again, absolutely dripping with feel. Super light steering, even at a complete standstill. And then we've got this absolute riot of a supercharged M42 going through a really rather light or really rather short diff. So I'll stick it in second here. 3,000 RPM and we're off. That was only 5,000 RPM, but the car's still pulling all the go you really need, and that noise is so addictive. Let's break it down piece by piece for you as usual. First things first, as I said, massive thin rim steering wheel. As you'd expect, a bit of a dead zone in the middle, but once you get it going, it does turn in really nicely. And when you do get it turned in, you're leaning on some really nice coilover suspension that's set up beautifully for the road. This isn't a track setup, it's not overly stiff, super compliant, loads of feel, just enough pitch and roll to let you know what you're doing. But there's only about 800 or 900 kilos here to manage, so there isn't a lot of work for the suspension to do. These have trailing arm independent rear suspension, which is frankly incredible for its age, and McPherson strut up front. Second thing, visibility. Tiny little A-pillars here, complete wraparound visibility, upright letterbox windscreen here, beautiful view of the Brecon beacons out the windscreen. This is just the dream. This is exactly what you want on a summer's day. You know, whether you're in Chelsea or Brecon, this is exactly the kind of car that you want to be in. That engine, so supercharged M42 318 SI engine running on a Omex standalone ECU. We've got about 200 horsepower here. That supercharger feeds air through a charge cooler, keeping the intake temps nice and cool. As a result, we have no shortage of power for this chassis. It is as fast as you'd ever want to go.
Many of you may already know the legend of the original M10 engine, forming the basis of the epic turbocharged F1 cars during the 1980s. What you might not know, however, is how much of a hidden gem these M42 twin-cam engines are. Overshadowed by the heavy 6-cylinder M50 engines that powered the 325s, these M42s came from factory with big valves, forged cranks, and solid shim heads. They were built with motorsports in mind and then detuned with mild cams and restrictive rev limiters to make affordable road car engines. Strap a supercharger onto one, however, and it's a whole different story.
Oh, that's brilliant. Even if you're just short shifting, it's just so good. I'm not going to, belt this car around corners at 10 tenths, because as much as you could, you just don't need to get the enjoyment out of it. This is for an enthusiastic but ultimately relaxed Sunday drive. It is absolutely brilliant. Boiling hot summer's day, uphill, second gear. Oh, this thing is brilliant. This is worth every penny. Why would you want a 911? The thing about this is that any road becomes a playground for you because it's just so small and so torquey. You don't need to get it up through a long ratio gearbox to 8.5k to enjoy it. It's enjoyable the second you touch the throttle. This is super nice, readable gearbox, clicks into place. Not your usual modern rubbery BMW gearbox. Really tight gates, close ratios, nice easy clutch. Right, let's talk about that chassis. So as we said, we've got coilover suspension, super neutral on the limit. It's not going to step out on you without reason, but it's also not really going to understeer. You just got a really nice, beautiful, neutral chassis. You know, James spent 7 years setting this car up to be good at doing exactly this, just being used on the road in the UK on a normal day. You can't replace that time and effort that's been put into this. You just can't. So let's take a second to talk about what this car is and what you use it for. So you might be in the market for an air-cooled 911 or an Alfa Giulia, or maybe even an old Ford, Lotus Cortina, Mark II Escort, that sort of thing. If you're in the market for one of those, you absolutely cannot look past this. This gives you all the things that those cars give with modern usability and a decent bit of power and reliability. You can buy parts for this engine from Euro Car Parts same day. All you need is a registration for an E36 319 IS. That's just unbelievable. You can actually use this car. You can take it on trips. You can get parts for it. James himself will supply parts to you if you need it. And on top of that, the market for these is, it's healthy, but it's still affordable, especially compared to like an air-cooled 911. I mean, just why would you go elsewhere? And what a gorgeous bit of road this is. There's a real joy in using a car for exactly what it's designed for, built for, and that's exactly what we're doing here.
What you see here with this O2 is a BMW equivalent to an Alfaholics Giulia, Gun2Works 911, or one of the many hot-rodded Mark II Ford Escorts out there. It's a classic in looks and feel that's been modernised just enough to truly thrill on the right roads. And the joy of James's O2 is that those right roads are right here in the UK. The size and accessible torque of this diminutive BMW means this car is fun everywhere, all of the time. From the narrowest single-track lane or city street to an open-flowing A road, this supercharged 1600-2 delivers every single time. I challenge anyone with an ounce of petrol flowing through their veins to not smile the second they touch the throttle and hear that supercharger whine.
This 1600-2 represents the unique opportunity to buy a cherished classic BMW with an incredible provenance and a terrific use case underpinning its build. It's coming straight to your fingertips at shootingbrake.com. Shootingbrake.com is your home for classic and enthusiast cars. We've always got something interesting up for auction, so make sure you check back to our website to see what we've got.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to see what else we get up to here at Shooting Brake. We've got some incredible videos lined up for you on cars that you love.